My father's laugh cut through the room like a blade, sharp and deliberate. We were in the middle of my engagement party. Glasses raised, everyone smiling, until he looked at me and let out that cold, mocking chuckle. It wasn't joy. It was the same laugh he used when I told him I'd landed my first job, or when I mentioned starting my own business. This time, it was louder, as if to make sure every guest heard. "An engagement?" he said, still smirking. "To him? And you think you can manage marriage when you can barely manage your own life?" The words landed like slaps. Conversations around us stopped. My fiancé, Daniel, shifted uncomfortably beside me, his hand tightening around mine. I felt my cheeks burn. Not from shame, but from the sheer audacity of my father humiliating me in front of our friends and both families. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but my father kept going, leaning back in his chair like a man holding court. "Marriage is for grown-ups, Lena. Maybe focus on paying off those little business debts before you play house." There was a muffled gasp from my mother, but she said nothing. No one did. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on, and I could feel the eyes of every guest pinned to me, waiting to see if I'd crumble. I didn't. I smiled, the kind of smile that meant war, and lifted my champagne glass. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "Marriage is for grown-ups. Which is exactly why, starting tomorrow, I'll be making some adult decisions." His smirk faltered for the briefest second, just enough to tell me he had no idea what I was about to do. Tomorrow, he'd find out. The morning after the engagement party, I woke up to 23 missed messages, half of them from relatives asking if I was okay, the rest from Daniel asking if we could talk later. My phone buzzed again before I could reply. It was my cousin Mia, the only one in the family who never sugarcoated anything. "Ev, last night was brutal," she said without a greeting. "But honestly, I think you should hit back. Hard." I didn't answer right away. My mind had been working overtime since the moment my father laughed in my face. This wasn't just about the party. This was about years of him dismissing me. Every accomplishment shrugged off, every decision mocked. I'd had enough. "I'm done letting him run the narrative," I said finally. "From now on, I'm running my own." I got dressed and drove to the office. My office? My father liked to call it your little hobby, when, in reality, my event planning company had doubled its revenue last quarter. But I'd kept most of that a secret, not out of fear, but because I knew one day I'd need the element of surprise. That day had arrived. By 10 a.m., I was sitting with my team in the conference room, pulling up the budget for our next big contract. "I need this event to be flawless," I told them. "Every detail perfect, no matter the cost. This is personal." They didn't ask why. They trusted me. As the meeting ended, I opened my laptop and started drafting a guest list. It wasn't for my wedding. It was for something far bigger. An event that would make last night's humiliation look like child's play, and one my father wouldn't see coming until it was too late. By lunchtime, the mystery event had taken shape in my head. It wouldn't just be another corporate gala or charity ball. This would be a showcase of everything my father thought I couldn't do. I wanted it dripping in elegance, efficiency, and power. And here's the twist. He'd be the guest of honor, without realizing it until the night was already underway. I started making calls. Luxury venues, high-profile caterers, the city's best jazz quartet. My father's circle thrived on appearances. and I planned to give them a spectacle they'd talk about for years. But there was one catch. I needed a reason big enough to lure him in. That's when it hit me. I could tie the event to a charitable cause, one linked to the industry he dominated. His construction firm had just won a massive city contract. I'd announce a fundraiser, celebrating local business leaders with him as a key figure. He'd walk in, expecting to be flattered, and instead, he'd watch as I took center stage, commanding the room he thought he owned. At 3 p.m., I called Mia. "I need you on my side for this," I said. "We're going to pull the biggest reversal he's ever seen." She didn't even ask for details before saying, "I'm in." "What's step one?" I smiled to myself. Step one was already in motion. By the end of the week, invitations would go out, and my father would please reply without suspecting. He was about to hand me the perfect stage to rewrite the family power dynamic forever. 3 days later, the invitations were ready, sleek, embossed, and impossible to ignore. I'd made sure my father's was hand-delivered, complete with a personalized note. "Your leadership inspires us all. We'd be honored if you joined us to celebrate the city's visionaries." I knew his ego would eat it up. But that afternoon, Mia called with a warning in her voice. "We've got a problem," she said. "A big one." Turns out, my father's right-hand man, Gerald, a human tape recorder with a loyalty complex, had overheard Mia confirming catering details with me. "He was asking way too many questions," Mia said. "I think he suspects you're behind the event." My stomach tightened. If Gerald pieced together the truth, he'd run straight to my father, and the element of surprise would be gone. "How much does he know?" I asked. "Not enough to ruin us yet, but enough to get curious." That night, I called in a favor from an old client, one who owed me for saving his botched product launch. Within hours, Gerald had been hired as consultant for a different high-profile gala. Conveniently, on the same night as mine, I'd just sidestepped disaster, but it rattled me. This wasn't just about planning an event anymore. It was a chess game. And my father didn't even know he was on the board. As I closed my laptop, I made myself a promise. From now on, every move would be airtight. The next morning, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Dad. For a second, I froze. He never called me, unless something was wrong. Or unless he was about to. Remind me, yet again, of how I'd strayed too far from the family path. I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Hello?" His tone was warmer than I expected. "I hear there's a big business gala coming up. Thought you might be going." My pulse skipped. Had Gerald spilled after all? "Maybe," I said cautiously. "Why?" There was a pause, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I'm thinking about making an announcement that night. Something about the future of Anderson Enterprises." My stomach dropped. Anderson Enterprises. His empire. This wasn't part of the plan. My gala was meant to be my stage, my moment, not a backdrop for him to steal the spotlight. "What kind of announcement?" I asked. He chuckled softly. "You'll see, but trust me, it's going to be big." The call ended, but his words stayed with me like a splinter. Was he planning to name one of my brothers as his successor? Was he using my event, unknowingly, to crown someone else as the future? Suddenly, my carefully constructed plan felt shaky. If he hijacked the night, the tables wouldn't turn in my favor. They'd flip right back to his. I had 2 weeks to figure out exactly what he was plotting and how to stop him. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for answers. The same day, I called Grace, a mid-level operations manager at Anderson Enterprises, and one of the few people in that building who still spoke to me after I walked away from the family legacy. Grace had always admired my independence, though she kept it quiet to avoid my father's wrath. When she picked up, her voice was hushed. "If you're calling me at work, it must be serious." I got straight to the point. "What's my father planning for the gala?" I heard he's making an announcement. There was a pause, followed by the faint sound of her office door clicking shut. "He's been meeting privately with James and Michael for weeks," she whispered, naming my brothers. "And there's a draft press release in PR's system about transitioning leadership to the next generation." My grip on the phone tightened. "Does it name who?" Grace hesitated. "It's not final, but from what I've seen, it's James." Heat rose in my chest. So, the big announcement was exactly what I feared. He was going to pass the crown, right there, at my event. Grace lowered her voice even more. "Listen, not everyone here agrees with him. You're not the only one he's underestimated. If you want my help, I'm in." That caught me off guard. I had expected information, not loyalty. "Why?" I asked. "Because," she said, "watching you win would be the sweetest thing I've seen in years." I hung up, knowing one thing. The game had just changed. I paced my apartment, replaying Grace's words. My father's plan was bold, but it wasn't bulletproof. If he was going to use my gala to crown James as heir, then maybe, just maybe, I could use his timing to dethrone him in front of the same crowd. But how? That's when I remembered something I'd buried under months of sleepless work. An email chain from months ago. It was a quiet inquiry from one of Anderson Enterprises' biggest partners about licensing my company's tech for their operations. At the time, I hadn't pursued it, knowing my father would rather set himself on fire than depend on me. But what if I resurrected that deal and finalized it right before the gala? The irony alone would be delicious. His successor announcement overshadowed by a far bigger headline tying his company's future to mine. I opened my laptop and started digging through old contacts. The partner's name popped up, still in my inbox. Fingers trembling, I typed a short, confident email. "Let's make this official. I can have the contracts to you before the 14th. Within an hour, I had a reply. "We're interested. Let's talk tomorrow." For the first time since hearing about the gala, I felt a rush of control. If I played this right, my father wouldn't just fail to humiliate me. He'd hand me the microphone himself. The next morning, I walked into the glass and steel office of Kingsley and Holt, the very partner my father had been courting for years, without closing a deal. I'd barely sat down before their coup. Nathan Price slid a folder toward me. "We've reviewed your encryption system. It's exactly what we've been missing." His tone was warm, but there was a glint in his eye. He knew this deal would ruffle feathers at Anderson Enterprises. "We'll sign, but we need exclusivity for the first 18 months. My stomach tightened. Exclusivity meant I couldn't sell the same integration to my father's competitors, which was a huge risk for a still-growing company like mine. Nathan leaned back, studying me. "Your father's made us offers before. We turned him down because we didn't trust his vision. Yours? Different story. But you'll need to move fast if you want this signed before your event." He knew about the gala. Of course he did. I took a slow breath, thinking about the cliff edge I was dancing on. If I said yes, I'd be binding my company to one massive client. If I said no, I'd lose the perfect revenge setup. I want a performance bonus clause, I countered. Hit certain benchmarks, and the exclusivity period drops to 12 months. Nathan's mouth curled into a smile. Ambitious. I like it. Let's draft it today. As we shook hands, my pulse pounded. One wrong move now, and this whole plan would explode in my face. By the time I got back to my office, my phone was buzzing nonstop. I thought it was Nathan's team confirming contract drafts, until I saw the caller ID, Dad. My gut clenched. I let it go to voicemail, but seconds later, a text popped up, "We need to talk." Immediately, no hello, no explanation, just a command. I ignored it, burying myself in paperwork, but 20 minutes later, my assistant peeked in, wide-eyed. "Your father's here." The air seemed to thin as he strode into my office, every inch of him radiating suspicion. He didn't sit. "I had lunch with Nathan Price yesterday," he said flatly. My stomach flipped. Nathan had kept that little detail to himself. "He mentioned you've been busy? Deals? Contracts? Big announcements?" His eyes locked on mine. "If you're planning to make a spectacle at my gala, think again." I forced a calm smile. "I'm planning to celebrate family success." "Isn't that what the night's about?" His gaze hardened. "Just remember who built the foundation you're standing on." "Don't embarrass me." He left as abruptly as he'd arrived, but the warning stayed behind, heavy and sharp. My father didn't just suspect. I was certain now he was preparing a countermove. The question was, what? 2 nights later, I found out exactly what my father was planning. And it was worse than I'd imagined. James, my cousin who'd always been more of a friend than a relative, called me after hours. His voice was hushed, like he was afraid someone might overhear. "You didn't get this from me, but your dad's adding a surprise announcement to the gala program." My grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of announcement?" "He's introducing a new family succession plan, and you're not in it at all. He's officially naming your brothers as co-CEOs in training." My pulse thudded in my ears. James hesitated. "And?" "He's planning to say you chose a different path so guests won't expect you to be part of the company's future." My jaw clenched so hard, it hurt. This wasn't just an exclusion. It was a public rewriting of my story, erasing everything I'd built. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. James sighed. "Because I've seen your face when he talks to you. You don't deserve this." After I hung up, I sat in my dark office, the city lights blinking outside. My father thought he was setting the stage for my quiet humiliation. Instead, he'd just given me the perfect cue for the biggest reveal of my life. The next morning, I was at the office before sunrise, a mug of black coffee in one hand and my laptop in the other. If my father wanted a public stage to erase me, I'd use that same stage to make myself unforgettable. I called my attorney first. "I want all our filings, contracts, and investor agreements finalized before the gala," I said. "No leaks. Absolute confidentiality." Next, I rang Nathan. "We're moving up the timeline," I told him. "My father plans to make his own announcement that night. I want ours ready to drop the second he finishes talking." Nathan didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. We'll have the media prepped and the release embargoed until your cue." For the rest of the day, my team moved like a covert operation, designing press packets, preparing social media teasers, rehearsing talking points. At one point, I caught my reflection in the conference room glass. I didn't look nervous. I looked ready. This wasn't about revenge for its own sake. This was about refusing to let someone else define me. By midnight, every detail was locked. The stage was set. The only thing left was to walk into that ballroom, smile through his speech, and then flip the entire story in front of every person who'd ever doubted me. The night of the gala, the air outside the Grand Marlowe Hotel was crisp, but inside the lobby, it felt like a furnace. Chandeliers glittered overhead, the scent of polished wood and champagne clinging to the air. I stepped through the revolving doors in a sleek, midnight blue gown, my hair pulled into a sharp, no-nonsense bun. People turned to look, some smiling warmly, others with the faint curiosity of wondering why I was even here. My father stood near the stage, a silver tie matching the silver in his hair, shaking hands with board members like a king greeting his court. His eyes found mine for the briefest moment. No smile, just a flicker of acknowledgement. Then, back to his conversation. Nathan met me near the coat check, pressing a small wireless earpiece into my palm. "We'll go live the moment you give the word," he murmured. "Media's on standby. Press release loaded. Countdown clock ready." I nodded, tucking the earpiece discreetly into place. All around us, guests mingled, glasses clinking, the hum of polite conversation masking the undercurrent of corporate politics. I sipped champagne, barely tasting it, watching my father take the stage. He tapped the microphone, the room quieting instantly. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate the future of our family legacy." My heart steadied, my hand slipping into my clutch, feeling the small trigger button Nathan had given me. The moment was coming. My father's voice carried through the ballroom like he owned the air itself. "For decades, our company has been a pillar in this industry. Tonight, I am proud to introduce the next generation of leadership, someone I've mentored personally, someone who understands what it takes to preserve our legacy." The crowd leaned forward. Cameras flashed. I didn't move, my fingers brushing the cool metal of the trigger in my clutch. He gestured toward the wings, and my cousin Daniel, tall, polished, and wearing that smug half-smile, stepped out. Applause erupted. My father's voice swelled. "Daniel will be taking on an expanded role in shaping our future. Together, we will drive the company into its most successful era yet." I felt the burn in my chest, but I kept my expression smooth. No mention of me, not even as part of that future. It was a public erasure, wrapped in polished words. The applause faded, and my father lifted his glass to family, tradition, and progress. That was my cue. I pressed the button in my clutch. Somewhere in the media pit, Nathan's team came alive. The first ping came from a journalist in the front row, his phone lighting up, brows shooting skyward. Then another, then another. A ripple of murmurs began to move through the crowd, like an invisible wave. My father was mid-sip when a sharp voice from the back called out, "Is it true your daughter's company just signed a $600 million government contract?" Heads swiveled. My father's hand froze on his glass. He looked toward me, but by then, the ballroom screens, meant for displaying gala highlights, flashed with a breaking news banner. Lydia Caldwell's tech firm lands record-breaking deal, poised to disrupt entire sector. My photo filled the screens, confident, direct, undeniable. A few gasps, then scattered applause. I didn't stand or make a show of it. I simply let the story play out without saying a word. Nathan's timing was perfect. Reporters were already moving toward me, phones recording. My father's jaw tightened, his practiced smile faltering for the first time all night. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside him, as if unsure whether to clap or disappear. Somewhere in the chaos, A guest whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "Looks like the future has already arrived." I stood slowly, letting the scrape of my chair against the marble floor cut through the murmurs. The cameras turned in unison. My heels clicked as I walked toward the stage. Not hurried, not hesitant. Just enough control to make every second feel deliberate. My father's eyes locked on mine. A silent warning laced with disbelief. I took the mic from the podium, my fingers brushing his just long enough to feel the tension in his grip. "I hadn't planned on speaking tonight," I began, my voice calm, steady. "But since the news is already out, I'll say this. Leadership isn't just about preserving a legacy. It's about building one that stands on its own." A few people nodded. Others leaned forward, hungry for more. For years, I've been told there was only one way to succeed, that my place was somewhere behind the scenes. I believed that, until I decided to build something that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. The applause started in pockets, growing louder. I didn't look at my father, but I felt his presence, stiff and silent beside me. So tonight, while we celebrate tradition, I'd also like to celebrate the future, mine included. I handed the mic back, smiling faintly as the room erupted. My father didn't move. The applause still echoed faintly as we stepped into the dimly lit service corridor behind the ballroom. The air was cooler here, stripped of the champagne and perfume haze. My father walked ahead, shoulders rigid, not speaking until we were out of sight of the last curious glance. Then he turned sharply. "You blindsided me," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. In front of my peers, I met his glare without flinching. I didn't leak the news, but I also didn't hide it. His jaw flexed. "You made me look irrelevant." There it was, not anger about the deal itself, but about how it shifted the spotlight. If relevance is more important than truth, maybe you should be worried, I replied. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Nathan appeared at the far end of the hall, holding out my phone. "You might want to see this," he said. The headline glowed like a flare. "Industry insiders speculate Caldwell Innovations could surpass Caldwell and Sons in market share within 2 years." My father's eyes dropped to it, then back to me. For the first time, I saw something flicker there. Fear. The moment we stepped out the side exit, the night air shattered with camera flashes. Reporters surged forward, their voices overlapping into a chaotic blur. "Lena, is it true? Your company's valuation just overtook Caldwell and Sons? Mr. Caldwell, are you planning a merger with your daughter's firm?" My father instinctively stepped ahead, shielding me from the crush. For a split second, it almost looked protective, until I realized it was about control. "No comments tonight," he said firmly, trying to usher me toward the waiting car. But then a microphone appeared inches from my face. "Ms. Caldwell, how does it feel to surpass your father's empire?" The question hung there, like bait, the crowd holding its breath. I caught my father's warning glance, the one that had silenced me since childhood. This time, I ignored it. "It feels," I said clearly, "like the beginning." Gasps rippled through the reporters. My father froze, his hand still on the car door handle. Before he could respond, a voice from the back shouted, "Does that mean you're competing directly?" I smiled faintly, stepping into the car. "I think that's obvious." The door shut, and the sound outside became a muffled roar. The tinted windows turned the camera flashes into quick bursts of white as the car pulled away from the curb. My father sat beside me, his posture rigid, jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to spit out in front of the driver. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the faint ringing in my ears from the reporter's questions. "You knew exactly what you were doing back there," he finally said, his voice low and sharp. "That stunt could cost us everything." "Us?" I kept my gaze on the city lights streaking past. "I think the valuation says otherwise." He turned to face me, eyes narrowed. "Pride is a fragile thing in our business, Lena. Tonight, you chipped away at mine in front of the whole industry." I was about to answer when my phone buzzed in my clutch. I glanced at the screen. Caroline, my CFO, urgent, alone. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Tell me you're somewhere private," she said, without preamble. "I am." "What's wrong?" There was a pause then. "It's the patent. I've just learned your father's name is on the filing." I slid down my spine. "That's impossible. I created it." "I know," she said, "but he filed a co-ownership claim 6 months ago. If it holds, he controls half of your core tech." I turned to my father, my voice cold. "Care to explain?" He leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Just making sure Caldwell stays Caldwell, no matter whose name is on the door." The city blurred past the glass, but all I could see was the trap I hadn't known I'd walked into. The next morning, I was in Caroline's office before she'd even finished her first coffee. She slid a thin folder across the desk, her expression grim. I pulled every record tied to the patent. "Your father filed for co-ownership through a shell company, one that just happens to be managed by his personal attorney." I flipped through the documents, my stomach tightening with each page. There it was in black and white, his signature alongside mine. A neat legal ambush. That gave him equal rights to the very technology my company was built on. If this holds, he can license it, sell it, even block you from using it without his consent, Caroline said quietly. "It's the kind of move that can stall your entire operation for months." My fingers dug into the folder's edge. "He's been planning this since before the gala." She nodded, "And I'm guessing he's counting on you being too distracted or too proud to fight it." I closed the folder and set it down, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "Then he's about to learn something new about me." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" I met her gaze. "That I fight better when the gloves come off." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd never thought I'd use. Someone with more power than my father and a score of their own to settle. I stared at the name on my screen. Marcus Vance, former CEO of Vance Tech. Once a giant in the industry, now a private investor with deep pockets and an even deeper grudge against my father. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since he tried to partner with Caldwell and Sons and my father crushed the deal out of spite. If anyone would understand the kind of power play Victor Caldwell had just pulled, it was Marcus. I hit call. He answered on the third ring. "Lena Caldwell. To what do I owe the pleasure?" His voice carried that smooth, dangerous edge I remembered. "I think we might have a mutual problem," I said, "and an opportunity to solve it." I laid out the situation. The patent, the shell company, the timing. Marcus didn't interrupt, but I could almost hear the wheels turning on the other end. When I finished, he laughed once, low and sharp. Victor never could resist overplaying his hand. "What do you want from me?" "Leverage," I said simply. Something that makes him regret this move before it costs me months of work. There was a pause. Then Marcus replied, "I might have exactly what you need. But it's not a gift. It's a trade. What's the price? You help me close a deal he's been trying to block for years. Publicly. And you do it before the patent claim hearing." I didn't hesitate. "Send me the details." As the line went dead, I realized this was no longer just about protecting my company. It was about dismantling my father's control piece by piece. Marcus's email landed in my inbox before noon. The subject line was blunt. The one deal he can't afford to lose. I opened the attachment and scanned the proposal. It wasn't just any acquisition. It was the controlling stake in a logistics firm that supplied nearly half of Caldwell and Son's high-value construction materials. If Marcus got it, he could choke my father's supply chain at will. And Victor knew it. That's why he'd been quietly sabotaging Marcus's bids for years. I called Marcus immediately. "You weren't exaggerating." "No," he said. "And I'm guessing you know exactly how to win it." I did. The firm's board chair, Marjorie Kell, owed me a favor after I'd helped her daughter secure a life-changing internship 2 years ago. "If I bring Marjorie around, you'll have the votes to close it," I said. "And in return," Marcus replied smoothly, "I'll bring you something that makes his patent claim crumble in court." It was a dangerous bargain. This wasn't just a corporate maneuver. This was a direct strike at the backbone of my father's empire. If I failed, I'd make an enemy out of both men. I pictured Victor's smirk the night of the gala, the way he thought he'd already won. My decision was instant. "I'm in." "Good," Marcus said. "Just no. When we do this, there's no going back." I ended the call and scrolled to Marjorie's number, my thumb hovering over the dial. One conversation could change everything. For both of us. I met Marjorie Kell at a quiet corner table in the Rosemont Club, the kind of place where power deals were whispered over crystal glasses and perfectly ironed linens. She was already seated, posture straight, eyes sharp behind her rimless glasses. "Lena," she said, her voice warm but curious, "to what do I owe this surprise lunch?" I smiled, settling in. "A mutual opportunity, one I think you'll appreciate." I didn't mention Marcus by name. Not yet. Instead, I painted the picture of a strategic acquisition that would stabilize her supply chain, boost her board's bargaining power. And this part was carefully framed, free her from a certain overbearing partner. Her eyebrow arched at that last point. She knew exactly who I meant. "I'm listening," she said. I leaned forward. "I can secure the financing you need to finalize the deal. On one condition, you vote in favor of my candidate at the acquisition hearing." Marjorie's gaze held mine for a long moment. "And if I don't?" I kept my tone even. "Then you'll stay tied to someone who sees you as leverage, not a partner." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the faint clink of a waiter setting down water glasses. Finally, she smiled, not wide, but with a glint of satisfaction. "Tell your candidate I'll be ready to vote." I thanked her, keeping my own smile controlled. She didn't need to know how much more this meant than just one corporate shift. As I left the club, my phone buzzed. Marcus's message. I found the crack in his patent claim. "Call me now." I called Marcus the moment I stepped outside, the winter air biting at my cheeks. He didn't waste time on greetings. "Your father made a mistake," he said. "A rookie one." I ducked into my car, shutting the door against the wind. "I'm listening." The co-ownership claim he filed? He backdated it to make it look like he contributed before your final prototype. Problem is, he used a template that includes metadata that shows the real creation date was months later, after you'd already filed your original application. I gripped the phone tighter. So if that comes to light, it's fraud, Marcus finished. And fraud means his claim gets thrown out. I have the metadata, Lena. The question is, do you want to destroy him in court or in public? The choice was a loaded one. Court would be cleaner, definitive. Public would be messy, but unforgettable. Marcus's voice softened slightly. You know my vote. I looked out at the gray skyline, thinking of the gala, the patent, the way my father had smirked in that car. I'll decide once the board votes on your deal. Let's keep both options ready. Marcus chuckled, spoken like someone who knows how to hold the knife without drawing blood. Until it counts. Before I could reply, a notification popped up on my phone. A press leak about Marcus's acquisition. And my name was in the headline. The headline glared at me from my phone screen. Vance Tech's Marcus Vance, poised to win landmark acquisition. With strategic backing from Lena Caldwell. My father's name wasn't in the title, but the subtext was screaming. I didn't have to guess how fast it would reach him. By the time I walked into Caldwell and Sons headquarters that afternoon, I could feel the temperature drop in the lobby. Assistants avoided eye contact. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. When I reached the boardroom, Victor was waiting, flanked by half the board and I, wearing that calm, dangerous look that meant the storm had already started. Care to explain this? He asked, sliding a printout of the article across the table. I met his gaze. It's business. You taught me to take opportunities when they come. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so only I could hear. That opportunity could cut this company off at the knees. And you think siding with Marcus Vance makes you look strong? It makes you look like a traitor. I didn't flinch. Maybe you should ask yourself why your daughter would rather back your rival than trust you. A flicker of something, anger, maybe fear, passed through his eyes before he straightened and addressed the board. Regardless, we'll be addressing this in the vote. From the far end of the table, Marjorie Kell cleared her throat, her expression unreadable. Then perhaps we should stop wasting time and begin. I sat down across from my father, knowing the next 10 minutes could rewrite the balance of power between us forever. The boardroom felt like it had shrunk, every sound amplified. The shuffle of papers, the faint hum of the HVAC, the click of Marjorie's pen as she prepared to take the vote. My father sat opposite me, his face carved from stone. Marjorie began, all in favor of approving the acquisition proposal. One by one, hands rose around the table. Mine stayed still, watching my father's jaw tighten as the count ticked upward. When Marjorie raised her hand, it was done. The deal passed by a landslide. Marcus now controlled the logistics firm that fed nearly half of Caldwell and Sons' supply chain. Victor's eyes locked on mine. You've made a mistake, he said evenly. I slid a slim envelope across the table. No, I've made a choice. Inside was a printed report. Marcus's metadata evidence of his fraudulent patent claim. Withdraw your claim quietly, and I'll keep this between us. Fight it, and I'll see you in court and the press. For the first time in years, he looked caught off balance. You wouldn't. I smiled faintly. You taught me to protect what's mine. The room was silent as I stood, collecting my bag. Outside, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Congratulations. 2 victories in one day. I glanced back at the boardroom door, then stepped into the hallway, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need my father's approval anymore. I'd built something stronger, my own legacy, and the power to defend it.